You are listening to Missed Apex Podcast. We live F1. Hey guys, Spanners here. We're going to talk about Daniel Ricciardo because this week marks 1 year since his unceremonious sacking at Singapore from the AlphaTauri / Toro Rosso / VCarb team. And we're going to take an opportunity to look back on the career of one of the most popular and charismatic drivers in F1 history. I am not the kind of person that goes back and researches this kind of thing. So thankfully, we're joined by resident F1 historian and real-world veterinarian, Christopher Turner. Hello, our very own Catman F1. Hi, Chris.
Hey, Spanners. I got a bit emotional researching this one. I love Danny Rick, as you can see by the merch that we're both wearing today for our video watches.
So what are you wearing? You're wearing the last Danny Rick Red Bull shirt.
Yeah, I'm wearing my Aston Martin Red Bull t-shirt. I've got my coffee table here, which is a spare wheel from his 2014 Monza race, right next to me with my drink on it. And you've got your RB t-shirt on.
Yeah, well, it is this season's VCarb shirt, which he didn't survive. His career didn't survive long enough to wear this one, unfortunately, Chris. Now, so we're going to be quite torn on this. I was never a fan of Daniel Ricciardo outside of his personality and how charismatic he was. I think he did an awful lot for Formula One, and I think the powers that be and anyone who makes a living out of F1 probably does owe Danny Rick quite a lot. And yeah, from that point of view, definitely miss him. But I wasn't a fan, from a sporting point of view.
Fair enough. I think he was a bit of a chalk and cheese character, but he brought a lot of fans in through Netflix. Him and Gunter Steiner basically made Drive to Survive what it was and brought in a huge swathe of new fans into F1. So got a lot to thank him for on that for our podcast, for example. But I think I find your viewpoint interesting on his driving personality, because I think a lot of people were drawn to him for his daring overtakes and making the sport interesting again.
Yeah, the old lick the stamp and send it. Well, look, as we've done a bunch of these historical look backs now, who have we done? We've got Mika Hakkinen, Rosberg,
Alonso, even though he's not quite retired yet, although he maybe should have done.
And didn't we do Jack Villeneuve or...
not yet. We're looking at doing people like DC. We haven't done him yet. Villeneuve, those sorts of guys. Yeah.
But those are all from the olden days and from my childhood. But this is really quite recent. But it does feel like his fans have already jumped on the Piastri train. But we haven't forgotten, Chris. We haven't forgotten. So as we look back today, what do we hope to discover, answer, and discuss?
Okay, so we've got a few questions we'd like to answer with this, and we've done a deep dive. So was Ricciardo worth the hype?
No.
Is he one of the best drivers not to have won a world championship?
No.
How did he compare to his teammates?
Unfavourably.
Was his post-Red Bull era a complete disaster?
Complete. The most possible level of disaster we could hope for.
And why was his driving style his downfall?
I don't know that. And by the way, I'll clarify that we could hope for if you were looking to categorise a disaster. But I could see how twisted up in pain you were there, Chris, as I was giving those answers. I did put the question to our Discord patron chat and said, sum up his career in 5 words or less. So here's just a few of those, and I'm going to put Chris back up on the screen so we can get the reaction. This is pretty much raw. I've pretty much took all of the ones that popped up. So Nico said, personality higher. Rough. Phil said, lick the stamp, send it. That is
classic.
I think if you go what's the Danny Rick quote? I'll stray away from I like him vulnerable and that thing he did with the shoes, lick the stamp and send it. That was a good one. Phil also says, made famous by Netflix. Chris says, fun bloke, could have done more. Michael says, Michael Holler, late breaker, heart taker, washed. Washed because it feels like there was a long tail on that career, wasn't there? Ian says, unrealised potential, but great fun. Andrew, send it. Shuey, never mind, bye. Will Boy said, never reached his full potential. Hamish, could have been legendary, nice guy. Michael says, big smile, went quick sometimes. Mark says, great lad, not fast enough. And Mike Stoner says, Ricciardo is actually pronounced Ricciardo. Well, that doesn't play well on written down, but there is some argument because I said Ricciardo for ages. He says it's Ricciardo. He's wrong. He says his own name wrong, but I respect how people want to say their names. And Brett C says poor team moves throughout his career. That is actually a bit harsher than I was expecting out of that lot. Our kind patrons, that lot.
Yeah, there wasn't many
many
complimentary
positives,
things, was there? And actually, he's made a profit line out of merch at the end of his career saying no regrets, only memories. So that's almost admitting self-defeat to me, really. You know, the whole honey badger thing has gone wrong.
Oh, of course, honey badger. Yeah. And so he had this like aggressive attitude of going for it. We're going to start from the beginning, but I would say that overall, I believe that his effort was an earnest effort, and you put his heart and soul into it. And I think all that stuff with the press, every single interview, he was generous. So someone's put the mic in front of him. They're doing their job. He did his job. And I just believe that he went into it. I don't think he left anything on the table. I think he made all the decisions he thought were correct.
Yeah, he was kind of a breath of fresh air when sat next to Kimi Räikkönen, for example, who would give you one word and he'd give you 30. Yeah. And he always did it with a smile. You're right. He just wore his heart on his sleeve, and he made the decisions that he thought were the right ones at the time. You know, you can't do anything more than that, really. And I think he saw the writing on the wall at Red Bull, so decided to jump ship. And then, as we are going to discuss, was that where it all went wrong for him?
No, but where did it start? Because getting into F1 at all, you know, it's like our child. You know, we complain about our lives, but the chances of our existence, of us being the one to make it to being alive, are so low that even being alive is special. So just like that, being in F1, just being in F1 is special. Was he always destined to be an F1 driver?
Oh, absolutely. Let's not forget, as you rightly said, that being in F1 is a top minute percentage of drivers who are good at their craft. They jump into anything else and they would be phenomenal at that. And when we talk about, we're going to go into driving styles and into whether they're adaptable, don't forget, these are minute differences that make the difference. We're talking about less than tenths of a second in some cases. And that's with quite vastly different ways of approaching a corner. So when I say things about different driving style not being adaptable, it's all on a bit of a sliding scale. But
it's funny, isn't it? Sorry, that is important to say. Like when we criticise Stroll, and I've had people going, "Yeah, well, he beat you." I'm like, "Yeah, of course he beat me." We're talking about very, very top level. Otherwise, the only people who could ever talk about F1 would be good F1 drivers. Because if it was just ex-F1 drivers, you'd go, "Yeah, but you weren't very good, so you can't talk about that." So basically, only Schumacher, Verstappen, Hamilton, and Kobayashi would be able to comment on anything in F1.
Especially Kobayashi with the sending it mentality. Anyway, so he started off as a Red Bull Junior driver. So they picked him up before he got to F1 and they loaned him to the HRT. I don't you remember HRT, one of the three new teams, Hispania racing team.
Yep.
He replaced Narain Karthikeyan, the Indian driver, for Silverstone. And I was actually at that race at Silverstone. There was a huge buzz around him. Whenever he came round, even though he was in one of the lowest of the low cars that was absolutely rubbish, he started and finished last. There was still, everybody cheered when he was in the grandstands. Even back then, he already had a following. And
had he done anything? Had he like clowned around, or was it just there was just a buzz around him?
I think there was a buzz around him. He'd done some testing for the Toro Rosso and Red Bull team. He was seemed to be quick, but also he'd already started to get that smile and personality out there.
One strange thing in F1 I found is that we Brits will support the Australians. So an Australian comes into F1, automatically seems to have a fan. Like it's our Australian cousins. We'll give them a pass, which as a cricket fan annoys the hell out of me. I'm like, why are we supporting these guys? It's crazy.
Yeah, same for rugby fans. I do find it a bit strange, but I do love an Aussie in Formula One, and Piastri's the same. Although we can get into that another time. But yeah, so Ricciardo was in. He's not had the same introduction to Formula One as someone like Lewis Hamilton or Kimi Antonelli had, for example. He managed to work his way up through the ranks through HRT for half a season, impressing by beating his teammate. His teammate was Liuzzi, Vitantonio Liuzzi. I don't know if you remember him.
Yeah, sure.
So he'd been around for a while, and he seemed to be pretty decent, but just not had the breaks. And Ricciardo was easily on pace with him and actually beating him. So, again, a good vibe check at the beginning of his career.
Yeah, and so when you go into a bottom team, like you had Russell going in, and you say, well, actually, Russell at first who was he up against in his first seasons?
He had Kubica, he had,
and then Sargent.
Yeah, Sargent and Latifi as well. So,
right, yeah.
Kubica, let's not forget, was an immense driver, but was heavily handicapped by this stage and wasn't able to get the performances that he deserved to be getting out of that car. So, yeah, Russell, for example, didn't have a yardstick to perform against. Liuzzi was a reasonable yardstick, but you wouldn't have suggested that if you put him in a top car, he would be.
Yeah, so Liuzzi's like that good. He's like a good slugger. You know, he's got a dangerous punch, but maybe not a big knockout punch. So it's a good one to put your young fighter in against as a first kind of prize fight.
Exactly. Before you put him up the likes of someone like Jev, for example,
yeah,
Jean-Eric Vergne. So he joined Toro Rosso. Both of them joined at the same time in 2012. Sorry, 2012, and then through to 2014 as well.
Yeah.
Now, Jev, he's got a bit more chops about him. He is...
Jean-Eric Vergne, yeah.
Yeah, Jean-Eric Vergne. He is now a 2-time World Formula E champion. So in 2017, 2018. So after this, of course, but he's still got good racing credibility about him.
Yeah, I think this is a big fight to go up against. And like, we now know that he's gone on and he's done well in Formula E. And before anyone bashes Formula E too much, that's a very handy grid, that Formula E grid, when it comes to driver talent.
Absolutely. It tends to be where you get a lot of drivers who either can't find a seat in F1, not through lack of trying or lack of talent, but more lack of space, because don't forget there's only 20
and money, lack of money as well. Yeah, so those Formula E drivers, they're all paid to go around and drive Formula E, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Got some serious talent there. So he won it twice, and he also races in the WEC for Peugeot with their crazy car that's got no rear wing, although they put one on it in the end.
So massively respected. I'm just trying to put across that, you know, this is a next step up on the ladder. Like, whether you say Jean-Eric Vergne ultimately, didn't make it in F1, but you speak to the motorsport community, I think he is definitely regarded as a top driver in the wider context of the world. And he followed me briefly on Twitter and then unfollowed me. I'm like, what did I do? I mean,
that's tantalising.
Yeah, I know.
Don't forget, all the best people don't follow anybody, though, Spanners. I'm sure you don't follow anybody yourself.
On Blue Sky, I'm doing that. 0 followers.
So Ricciardo up against Eric Vergne. So Ricciardo got the better in qualifying. So in 2012, he out-qualified Jev 16-4. And in 2013, it was 13-6. So it's clear that he had the pace over Vergne on a one-lap stint. But at the beginning in 2012, I think it was the opposite in the races. I think Vergne showed stronger racecraft, but he was less consistent, and he kind of struggled to match Ricciardo's kind of growth rate as they carried on. And so in 2012, for example, let's have a look at that.
You said 2012 again. In 2012.
I can't. I'm looking too far back. I can't do it.
I did say no edits to Chris before we started. Sticking to that.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that. So, yeah, in 2013, we'll move on to that one.
Yeah.
So Ricciardo got 20 points compared to Jev's 13. And this was, of course, when Mark Webber was announcing his retirement midway through 2013. And Ricciardo was on a vein of form. This was at Silverstone. He qualified 5th and raced to 8th, whereas Vergne was 12th and finished nowhere with a puncture. And so Ricciardo's got this momentum behind him. And he's got the big smile. He's got the racecraft that is developing compared to Vergne. And now we get to Suzuka. And this is probably the clincher for Red Bull. So you might think that a 10th place finish is not a headline grabbing performance. But the way he did it was by holding off Michael Schumacher, albeit in his second career, but still a pretty ruthless competitor. Schumacher had pitted and he was on soft tyres, and Ricciardo was on hards. So you'd think that the momentum's going to be with Schumacher. He's going to get past. But Ricciardo did some awesome defensive driving to make sure Schumacher stayed behind, and the whole world took notice at that point. So
it's like a TV moment, isn't it? Yeah, if that would make a good movie, because that would be a key plot point in the film. And I think, didn't a similar thing happen with Mark Webber in the Minardi, when it was only 6 points? I think it was only the top 6 that scored points, and he went and got a 5th place. And that stamped Mark Webber's entry into F1 as well. So yeah, those moments can be pivotal. Yeah,
same with Alonso at Minardi. These guys can make a backmarking team look good and have a good performance. So even though it's only a 10th place, the way he did it was incredible.
That's a future show, isn't it then? Midfield moments that made you stand out. So I just thought of Vettel with Monza in 2007. Is that he won?
Yeah,
2008.
Yeah, 2008. Yeah, with again in a Toro Rosso. He won the race in changeable conditions.
And then you could argue Perez saved his career with the Istanbul win and a few podiums that year. And there's a few like that where people have just suddenly come in with that late season performance, and they've gone, De Vries substituting in for Alex Albon with his burst appendix. He had that great result with Williams, and then we don't need to go too far in that story. But these moments, I wonder, did that make the difference? Is that what robbed us of Jean-Eric Vergne continuing in F1?
Oh, almost certainly. And who knows what Jean-Eric Vergne would have made of that position if he'd been promoted instead. But we shall never know. Because, obviously, Ricciardo then
got the call. Yeah.
Yeah, he got the call to go up next to. So let's have some context here. Vettel, the reigning 4-time world champion when Ricciardo joins Red Bull. Ricciardo is a hot shoe that's coming in. You're not going to expect him to be able to beat Vettel, are we? Seriously?
I was hoping, because I really hated Vettel. Like him now. I like Uncle Seb now, but I hated the Vettel that was getting team orders over Webber, who I probably liked a bit more, and who was just ruining F1. You have to remember at the time, we had barely recovered from Schumacher when then Vettel came along. So I was very much anyone but Vettel. And the whole time I was like, nah, he's not good. He's going to get found out. So I'm pretty sure I was cheering on Ricciardo to beat Vettel in this season.
Yeah, and Vettel had done a Schumacher in the previous season, hadn't he? 2013. I think he won something like 8 on the bounce or something.
After Silverstone, they changed the tyres, and which suited Red Bull a lot more for safety reasons. Yeah, and they didn't win another race. I didn't think they'd lost another race, and they were winning them by a pit stop as well.
Yeah, it was huge, and it was always Vettel. Webber couldn't get on top of it the same. So, and he knew he was retiring anyway.
Leaving the team, not retiring. You mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the first race in Australia, right? Ricciardo's home turf. He knows it quite well.
Sorry, Chris. That's my bad. You were talking about Webber. Beg your pardon. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's fine. It's Ricciardo's home turf. And first race, he starts and finishes second, right? So that's huge, mind-blowing. He's on the podium, and then he gets disqualified.
Oh, of course. For the fuel hose.
That's it. That's right.
Go on, explain what was going on with the fuel hose.
Yeah. So was this? There's been a lot of fuel flow irregularity problems, hasn't there? Is this the one where they had a stretchable hose so that after where it was measured, it could store more fuel to then use it at a separate time? Yeah,
it was just flexible enough so that it would go through and then it would build up just past the sensor. So you had this bulge then of fuel. So when you press the throttle, you got a higher fuel flow rate. So that's not a loophole. That's out and out. That's an out and out cheat, a deliberate, cynical cheat.
Oh yeah, it's not like they manufactured faulty hoses. They did that deliberately.
No, because the rule was you can't have this fuel flow higher than this set limit. It wasn't you have to indicate on this sensor. The sensor was just a way to help them monitor the rule. Yeah. Yeah, so I forgot about that. That was his first race. P2 promotes Magnussen to P2.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, absolutely. But of course, Vettel was nowhere in that race, and he probably had the same fuel flow irregularity as well. So, it's a huge win for Ricciardo. It's even though he got no points from it or anything like that, he's already stamped some authority on the team there. And actually, so through the season, he absolutely trounced Vettel. So if we look at the head-to-head between the two of them, Ricciardo got 3 wins to Vettel's 0 over the course of the year, which is quite amazing, really, considering he's just come into the team. We can look at those individually. So looking at Canada, for example, in 2014. So again, more context. So 2014 was the year where new rule changes. Mercedes had brought their immense power unit and their immense car.
Yeah, first hybrid engine. Yeah,
that's right. So it was Hamilton making a meal of beating Rosberg to the title. So in Canada, Mercedes had a problem with overheating. They'd basically closed up too much of the car, and their cars were overheating. They had a MGUH problem for Rosberg. I think Hamilton's engine just blew up straight out of the box. So Ricciardo had to be there to take the victory, and this was going to be his first race win. and he wasn't in third place when those two went out. So Ricciardo had to overtake Perez on the outside of the first corner to get past him. And Perez was in a Force India, which wasn't a slouch at this point. It was actually quite a good car because it had that Mercedes power unit. And don't forget, Canada's quite a power-hungry circuit, isn't it? Because there's just lots of long straights.
And the for context as well, the Renault was a all-round poor engine. It was slow and unreliable.
Awful. Absolutely awful. It was just detonating itself everywhere, and it had no power. So the Red Bull arguably was probably a better car than the Mercedes in the corners, but the fact that it just had no power down the straight meant that it couldn't do anything. So yeah, he perfectly judged a pass around the outside of Perez and then went on to overtake Rosberg for the victory as well. So yeah, that was his first race win, and yeah, it was a pretty good start. But I would say that more impressively was his victory in Hungary in 2014. So another tricky track, but this time the Mercedes didn't retire. He had to pass people on merit. And he had to pass Hamilton and Alonso to get this victory. So he overtook Hamilton around the outside of turn 2. So I don't know if you remember. So Hungary's got that really long first corner, then a short DRS straight into the left-hander that goes slightly downhill, and you can just kind of push people out to the side. But Ricciardo managed to hang it around the outside of that corner, which then set him up for the inside of the next right. And it was a phenomenal move that hadn't really been seen before. And they do it all the time now, but this was probably one of the first times that that anybody had done it around that corner. And I just remember the excitement on Crofty and Martin Brundle. They were like, oh, he's managed to defend it. Oh, no, he hasn't. Ricciardo's just thrown it around the outside. It was awesome. And then, as was becoming quickly a trademark, he then managed to send it into turn 1 against Alonso.
I think, yeah, he really did come out with this really aggressive attacking style. And I in this modern field now, there's a lot of drivers who will send it like that. And I think Hamilton's late braking was less about overtaking. It was more about lap time. Whereas Ricciardo was building this reputation of just being able to overtake you from anywhere. Like, you were not safe.
Yeah, you watch some of the onboards from Ricciardo, and it's just scary because somebody like me wouldn't even be considering making a move from that distance. Then all of a sudden he's alongside into the braking zone. You have no idea where it's come from or how he's going to do it. So, as you say, that was quite a reputation he was building there against some of the best drivers in the world. This is a pretty immense field we're talking about.
Yeah, and I want your opinion on whether you think that was a genuine performance gap to Vettel. So you have to put that in context of Vettel was used to a car with the double diffuser, and he was accelerating while other people were braking. He was being able to just absolutely scale electric slot car around those corners. He then gets to a car that barely moves, often breaks down, and famously in practice. By the way, this is all my memory. He's cheated. He's done research in the testing sessions pre-season. He was like getting out the car and just you could see in his demeanor, like, this isn't winning me. This isn't a championship car. And you have to wonder how much that motivation makes a difference. Well, with Ricciardo, he's like, this is a Red Bull. This is a top car. I'm fighting for wins. But as a Vettel hater, I would love you to just go, no. Ricciardo showed Vettel up for the fraud he was.
I'll agree with you on that. I think he did. So it's all down to driving style.
Hyperbole, obviously. Hyperbole a bit.
Yeah, of course, absolutely. So you correctly pointed out there that Vettel won his titles in the double diffuser era and in a car from Red Bull that from 2010 to 2013 had so much rear downforce with the diffuser that you could basically abuse it to death and it wouldn't step out on you.
Yeah.
So that was his preferred driving style, and he was immense at that skill. But then the rules changed, and there's a lot less downforce from that diffuser, and the Red Bull cars suddenly become very front heavy, front pointy, essentially. And that is less what Vettel wants and a lot more what Ricciardo wants, which is just convenient as he's stepped up into the team. So things are kind of moving towards Ricciardo naturally, and I think that's probably where Vettel saw the writing on the wall. You're right, I think he got out of the car in testing once when the engines blew up, probably just went, this is just not going to happen again.
Yeah, I think it was slow, and I didn't like it anyway, and now it's just blown up. So I'm not having it. Obviously, it's a conspiracy theory because nothing's been proved that his contract said he had to finish at a certain place or he was free to go, and that he tanked his own performance. But surely, in a performance clause like that, that's assuming you're the better driver. Like if your teammate is doing well, surely that doesn't trigger a clause. That's the only thing that doesn't quite get me fully on board with that conspiracy theory. I think you're just right. We suddenly went into a regulation set that was the complete, not only not his preferred driving style, but the complete opposite of what he's been driving. And maybe Ricciardo didn't have that disadvantage.
Yeah. So absolutely. And so people like Vettel and Hamilton, you might have heard of Ving a corner rather than making a U shape. For a corner. So I'm much more of a U shape in karting and everything. Like it is the U shape basically. You want to kind of get everything done early, and then you're wrestling the car through the corner. Whereas the V people will just like aim for the apex and get it braked in a bit more of a straighter line, because you're then going to wrestle and do the work and throw and get the car rotated much more in a compact space of time. Absolutely right. So Vettel and Hamilton do that sort of thing where they brake later than Ricciardo would do, harder than they would do, and have a lower minimum corner speed. So they would kind of get it brake later, but then accelerate harder.
Interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
Whereas Ricciardo, what he liked to do is not be aggressive on the braking. He'd actually brake earlier than those other guys and for longer.
Yeah, because that moves. That moves the weight over as well. Yeah, sorry, I interrupted.
No, it's fine. Yeah, it keeps up that momentum, and you have a slightly unsteady rear end that can then point the car in. But essentially, you're right. It doesn't move the car around as much. Keeps the aero platform more stable, which is exactly what the Red Bull needed.
Well, if you as if I'm a driver expert here, but if you are braking for longer, and then obviously you're introducing the steering inputs, then what you're doing is you're allowing the aero to. I think the aero is on you for longer, and it means it's moving the weight to the side. So if your steering wheel's to the right and you're braking, you're moving that weight over to the left-hand side. So instead of getting it all done in one bit, you're actually kind of putting that weight on the outside for longer, and you're getting more of a kind of slingshotty scalextric effect. If you can get that right, you can do that in a go-kart. And if you get it right, it feels incredible.
Absolutely, yeah. Weight transfer is so important in a go-kart, and in a Formula One car, it's exactly the same thing. And it also helps you to keep your tyres in better condition if you can balance that without too much sliding, which Ricciardo seemed to be able to do. So it's a bit of a misnomer that Ricciardo was known for late braking and amazing braking. That wasn't what made him fast on a day-to-day
on a normal
circuit.
lap. On a normal lap,
exactly.
But he had the ability to brake late when it meant sending it down the inside. Yeah,
exactly.
That's interesting. That is interesting, Chris.
So that's what made him fast in a Red Bull, and we'll come on later as to why that didn't work in different types of cars. But it did mean that in the Red Bull, he was phenomenal, and he could. So you're talking about the comparison to Vettel. So the qualifying average was fairly similar, 9 versus 8 races where Ricciardo was ahead, but he finished 11 times ahead compared to Vettel's 3. These are in comparable races where they've not had engine blunders or whatever. And Ricciardo got 238 points compared to Vettel's 167. So it's a massive difference, particularly for a guy who's just come off of becoming a 4-time world champion.
Yeah, it doesn't look good for Vettel, but it looks amazing. Like, it's the perfect result. If you going into a team, you want to beat someone with a great reputation. That was a gimme. That was such a great championship result for him.
Yeah, it set the world on fire for him. People were saying that he was the best driver of 2014. As I mentioned earlier, I think Lewis probably didn't make that championship as easily as he probably should have done. Listen to the Rosberg episode if you want to know more about that one. But so Rosberg and Hamilton battled it out, and Ricciardo was the victor in the eyes of the people, I think. So then what we did was we moved on to 2015. So Vettel decides that he's had enough. He doesn't want to be shown up by a rookie anymore, so moves on to Ferrari. And Ricciardo is now the de facto team leader at Red Bull because Daniel Kvyat from the Toro Rosso team steps up to be alongside him.
The torpedo.
Torpedo Kvyat. He was quite fun. We talked about licking the stamp and sending it. I think I don't think he braked very often. He just used other cars as a barrier. But the 2015 Red Bull was a bit of a dog. He got no wins. We thought the Renault engine in 2014 was bad, but in 2015 it was just awful. And there was reliability everywhere. There was no performance in that car. And unfortunately for Ricciardo, the momentum he gained in 2014 kind of took a bit of a sidestep because he had no victories. He only got 92 points. So if we compare the two seasons, 238 versus 92 points, that's pretty atrocious. And actually, over the course of the season, Kvyat got 95 points, so he actually beat him. That being said, of course, when the car was a bit better in the latter part of the season, Ricciardo had the majority of the reliability issues. So the point swing doesn't necessarily indicate who was the better driver.
This sounds like apologist talk here. When the car was terrible in 2014, we didn't give Vettel that much of a bit of leeway. But yeah, I mean, this is a period where Red Bull were being plagued with unreliability anyway, and that would continue into Verstappen's entry into Red Bull as well. So here, we had a picture really of 4 seasons of unreliability kind of dogging Red Bull.
Absolutely. And you can look at it this way, Spanners. I've got one stat that will help my case here.
Okay.
He spent more laps ahead of Kvyat. So he spent 500. He spent, before retirements and stuff, he spent 536 laps ahead versus 430. So I'm going with that one to say that Ricciardo was a better driver than Kvyat.
Mm. And then ultimately, we drove with a little bit more control, and Kvyat didn't last very long.
No, absolutely. He lasted halfway into 2016. Actually, you're right in that Max Verstappen then stepped up and took his place at the main team, and the rest is history, in Spain in 2016. And Max actually won that first race that he drove for Red Bull, but Ricciardo should have won it.
Okay, so remind me of that, because it's most famous for the Mercedes guys taking each other out. And then we had, in my mind, we had Verstappen won it, and was Raikkonen in second place in his Ferrari. And he was being praised really, not only did he win, but he held off a faster Ferrari. So that was a huge feather in the Verstappen cap.
Absolutely. That was the story of the race. But what happened before that was that Ricciardo was on course to win that race, and he was being followed by Vettel and then Raikkonen and Verstappen. Red Bull were worried that Ferrari were going to split the strategy for their Ferrari drivers, and that's exactly what they did. So Raikkonen stayed on a 2-stop and Vettel went to a 3. So they decided to worry more about Vettel than they did about Raikkonen, which is a natural thing at this point, because I don't think that Raikkonen was as much of a threat.
No.
So they put Ricciardo onto a 3-stop. But unfortunately, that was the slower way to do things. So he had an extra stop and he couldn't catch back up again to Verstappen and Raikkonen. So in theory, if Ricciardo had been able to stay on the strategy that he wanted to stay on, then he would have won that race, and it wouldn't have been such a, should we say, a glory story for Max.
Oh, I'd forgotten that. I had forgotten that. And in a story now that's going to have quite limited plus points, that would have been a great story as well, because we've beaten Liuzzi. We've beaten Vergne, we've beaten Vettel. This is all looking great so far. Let's say we've seen off Kvyat, because I think in a different
all intents
world,
and purposes, his driving saw off Kvyat, whether the results shed it or not.
So you've got the new challenge, right? Now you're the kind of the big dog, the prize fighter. You've not got a unified belt, but you've got the Red Bull belt. You're the current Red Bull champion, and then this young Verstappen comes through, who Mercedes were after, who skipped a bunch of series, youngest ever driver in Formula One as well, gets promoted mid-season with no testing, and the gods just flip it and take that win away from you. And again, does that set the tone that then actually Vettel's a bit of a wonder kid?
Yeah, I think it does set that tone. However, you could look at the stats through the season and go that Ricciardo still out-qualified Max 11-6, and don't forget, this is not prime Max we're talking about, and this is proper prime Ricciardo we're talking about. So there is a bit of a, he's not got that much experience. And actually, towards the end of 2016, we start seeing a skew towards Max getting more on top of the car, getting better qualifying. Yeah. And the points are fairly similar. So in the time that they were together, you get 220 versus 191. So Ricciardo does beat Max, but it's a bit tighter than maybe he would have liked it to have been.
I got the impression during that time that actually Ricciardo was being outdone in the races a little bit, and I just got this. But it was so hard to pick apart because the race, the unreliability kind of split them. So they're not having their unreliability at the same time. So there was lots of races where you couldn't get a head-to-head comparison against them. But I just did get the feeling that Verstappen was a bit more of a threat in the races on race pace.
I think what Verstappen was doing was he was a very big threat, but he made a lot of mistakes. I don't know if you remember him just clattering into most people that he came across. I think in China, where Ricciardo won a race, Verstappen was following him through and just clumsily punted. I think it was Raikkonen in the Ferrari. I think it was punted him off.
I think it was Vettel.
Was it Vettel?
I think it was Vettel,
one of the two. Oh yeah, it was Vettel because I remember the comment on the radio afterwards. But so he was a bit crashy at that stage. And actually in Monaco in this season is probably a prime example of this. So Verstappen was so keen to stamp his authority on Ricciardo that he wanted to win every practice session. And in Monaco, that comes at a cost because he clattered one of the curbs and then tore off one of the corners of his car in P3. And then it made it very difficult for his team to get him ready for qualifying. And I don't think, if my memory serves me rightly, I don't think he actually made it into qualifying. So I had to start really far back. Whereas Ricciardo then went and got pole. And Ricciardo should have won that Monaco race.
Oh, no, I can't even think about it. This is horrible. Go on, sorry. Yeah.
No. So he was leading in intermediate conditions, masterfully driving through this race. And the team are making the right call. They go, okay, we've now found a gap for you to pit into, to pit onto dries. It's the right time. Come on in, Daniel. We've got you. You're safe with us. And he peels into the pit lane. All his guys are there, but they've forgotten one crucial thing. I can't remember what it was. Oh, the tyres. They forgot. So the tyres were still in the blankets in the garage, and all of the mechanics were just gesticulating, and Ricciardo was sat there for, I think it was 10 or 11 seconds, just waiting. And you could just see the victory slipping away. Because he comes out of the pit lane after this stop, and Lewis just breezes past with less than a second between them. And so, as you rightly know, when Monaco is a normal race, you just can't overtake. So that's it done. And he was heartbroken. Absolutely heartbroken.
To those not familiar, I normally try and do a link of the things that we speak about, but I haven't been taking notes of those. But I'll try and find a YouTube link to the Monaco one. And it was because the Monaco garage is split over like 2 levels or 3 levels. So they had to actually go up and down levels to try and get these tyres. Because I think they had the wrong tyres and then they had to go and find it. And if we just skip forward slightly, just so we know there's a redemption arc to this story, he did then go and win Monaco.
He did, but it didn't make it easier for himself. This was now in 2018.
Yeah, we'll skip back. We'll come back. Yeah, we'll come back.
Yeah. So he wins. He does win in Monaco in the end. Bless him. And this is, where he puts his arms out and falls into the pool. Love it. So again, Ricciardo qualified on pole and was dominating the race. I think it was 28 laps into the 78 lap race. He comes on the radio and goes, "I'm losing power." And you're just thinking, not again. This can't happen again to the same guy, particularly
Not like this. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And so he has to run 50 laps of the Monaco Grand Prix with, I think it was his MGU-H or one of the electrical components of the engine basically stopped working. And in most races, that's game over. But of course, this is Monaco, where if you drive correctly without making any mistakes, you can park the bus, essentially. And that's exactly what he did. And I think it's easy to kind of shrug this off and say that, it's Monaco. He would have won it if he was driving a school bus. But actually, you still have to be so precise, especially if the car's not doing exactly what you want it to do. You don't know how much power it's actually going to give you. You have to be able to make sure that you keep it out of the harbour and ahead of the other guys. And it wasn't easy. He had Vettel behind him who was putting a lot of pressure on.
Look, he had to be out in front in the first place. I'm going to push back that, it wasn't easy. obviously we couldn't do it. But yeah, during the 2018 Monaco Grand Prix, he had an MGU-K failure. So that's the kinetic one, isn't it? That's the one that you recover energy from braking, yeah? Which caused a significant loss of power and almost led to a brake fire. So don't want to do down that achievement, but I wonder what level of car could we go down to in the motorsport hierarchy, put it on pole at Monaco, get it through turn one, what level of car could actually defend and hold on? Because I reckon you could go pretty far down. An F2 car would win that race in that situation.
I think it has to be wide enough to stop an F1 car going past as well.
Yeah. So like, I don't know, you could probably put like the hypercars in there and that would win.
Oh, yeah.
A hypercar would win in that situation. Yeah. So I'm just saying, for Horner to go on there and go, oh, it's such a magnificent, it's a miracle, how could you do it? I didn't buy into that. To me, that just proved like my thing of being angry about Monaco existing. that really proved and doubled down. But yeah, happy ending for him. And the radio message, I think I'm right on this one. He's really passionate, screaming down the radio going, this is my time. And like, he's going to go on and win the championship and be... Really, this is the peak of his career, I think. But we've skipped forward. So I think that was the death throes of his career when we're getting to this kind of point. But in 2016, it was still looking, we didn't know which way it was going to go.
Yeah, and in 2014 and 2016, a lot of outlets argued that Ricciardo was the best driver of the season. As you say, this is peak pomp of Ricciardo. He's been absolutely brilliant and is still leading his team despite one of the most hyped drivers of a generation who would, in the end, go on to be one of the best drivers there's ever been. He still managed to hold that team together. So they had a bit of a battle, Max and Ricciardo. So you can imagine that these two wanting to stamp the authority on the team. They had a head-to-head in Malaysia. So I don't know if you remember 2016 Malaysia spanners with there's something significant happened there.
Sometimes I'm like nearly falling asleep at night and I'm like, engine failure 2016. Yes, Hamilton engine failure. And we never got down to the root cause of it. And we will never know if something was left on something.
Exactly. But then that did leave Ricciardo and Max to fight out for a victory because Rosberg was nowhere. And these two, so we had Ricciardo in front and Max was very quickly catching up to Ricciardo. So he had to defend for all his might against Max, who, let's face it, he's quite an aggressive driver. Like I say, particularly at this point of his career, he was just plying his craft and working out how much he could get away with. And Max throws it up the inside into the fast left-right sweepers. And most accounts, that's game over for Ricciardo. He's done. But he holds it around the outside somehow and is basically just says, not today, buddy. That's my best Australia accent. And
that's really good. It's quite good. Yeah, that was good. Well done. I'm going to put that one on the fridge.
And then, just holds it around the outside and then Max doesn't get another chance. So it was a really tense moment, really exciting. And Ricciardo came out on top, which I wouldn't have suspected at that point.
Yeah, and I forget that Rosberg didn't win that because Rosberg started a little bit further down, had a little off, didn't he, in turn one, and then fought his way back to P2.
So no, it was a Red Bull 1-2. I think he came third.
Third. Yeah. Okay, brilliant. So look, we go into 2017, and it's still on as even. But at this point, they're not fighting for a championship or anything at this point. But obviously now we know that Red Bull will eventually go on and win 5 drivers' titles and 4 world championship titles. Like, this battle was way more crucial than we realised at the time, really.
Oh, absolutely. This is for honours in the team. This is for being the top dog in the team. There's very few teams that can manage 2 top-tier drivers without there being some sort of drama.
And Red Bull's not one of them.
Red Bull was definitely not one of them. So the momentum, so this is Max's first full season at Red Bull in 2017, and the momentum is definitely starting to swing towards Max, not just in terms of performances, but also in terms of the rhetoric that the team is putting out. They're going, we want Max to be the youngest ever world champion. And Danny's going, hang on, I thought I was your selected child for the title. What's going on here? It wasn't going to happen in 2017. Again, the car was awful. Well, the car wasn't awful. The Renault Power Unit was awful. And if you go and watch the Netflix Drive to Survive series, this is when they started imploding in their relationship between the two.
What was the first season to be covered by Drive to Survive? Oh, now I've got you on there.
Whoa, yeah.
I thought it was 2018.
No, they covered this because they covered the bit we'll come on to, which is the Baku crash between the two. I think it was 2017 because their first in the first year of Drive to Survive, one of the main plot points was Ricciardo leaving Red Bull to go to Renault. So that was in 20.
So AI is saying Drive to Survive documented the 2018 Formula One World Championship and premiered in 2019. There we go.
Yes. Ooh. Yeah, there you go.
The old brain's working today.
There you go. Because Ricciardo won in Baku in 2017, but then in 2018 was the clash between Ricciardo and Max.
Yeah.
Which ultimately set things off. But 2017 was okay. Max again was having a bit of a crashy phase, so he had 3 DNFs for contact, but he did get the upper hand over the course of the season against Ricciardo. So 13-7 in qualifying, but the points didn't necessarily match up to that. So it was still 200 versus 168. Max was definitely on top.
Yeah.
And he won 2 races versus Ricciardo's 1. So one season you can possibly put down to it. It wasn't a whitewash, but equally, as I say, things are starting to turn against him.
Yeah.
The one race that Ricciardo won was the Baku race where Hamilton and Vettel under the safety car had their little incident.
Yes.
And Vettel gave him a love tap.
Yes. So Vettel got a 10-second stop and go, I think.
Yeah, stop and go, yeah.
And then driving. Hamilton had a loose headrest.
Yes,
and
he was having to hold down.
Yeah, so he was having he got basically a meatball flag or whatever the equivalent had to come in. Yeah.
Yeah. And then on a safety car restart, Ricciardo managed to overtake 3 cars into the first corner. Just because they were all caught napping on the outside, fighting each other, didn't see him coming.
The lad can drive. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, he can certainly send it. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So that was a properly good race for him, but not a properly good season. As I say, Max did manage to get the upper hand over him, and then we come into 2018.
Yeah, we come into 2018 having already recorded 45 minutes. We will run over but this is the crucial phase, isn't it? This is the potential of Daniel Ricciardo all the way, and I think you can argue that 2018 is really the do or die for his career. It's easy to say in hindsight because we'll go forward to go. He tried to make a Lewis Hamilton esque move to Renault, then back to the big time with McLaren, and gosh, if that had worked out, he'd be world champion now, maybe now. But yeah, 2018, I think this is an important one to focus on because this is where he saw the writing on the wall.
It is, and actually, if you were to look at it 6 races into the season, Ricciardo's got 2 wins and Verstappen's got none. And Verstappen's incident prone. Ricciardo looks like he's taking control of the team again. But then, guess what? Renault start having reliability issues again. He has 6 DNFs through the course of the season.
6 all engine.
Yeah,
all tag
engine
Hoyer.
power unit. Yeah. That's 6.
Yeah,
They couldn't even bear to call it a Renault. And Max starts coming on strong. He beats him 14-5 in the qualifying battle. That's fairly catastrophic for Ricciardo, and in the points as well. And 3/4 of the time they're on track together, Max was ahead. So it's a big issue for Ricciardo, and he's got to start wondering at this point. We covered the Monaco victory, which was great for him. He also wins in China, where he was doing some China very quickly on China was probably one of his best races. And if you want to watch some of these overtakes that we're talking about, go watch China 2018. Just throws it up the inside of Bottas. This is the one where Bottas was closing the line, and between Bottas and the edge of the track on the inside, there was about a Ricciardo space left for him. And he managed to stuff it in there and keep it on the circuit. So brilliant masterclass of overtaking, one of his best races. But in general, I think the tide was turning against him. So...
Oh, that was
no edits.
That was a Van Gene level of mic knock. And Van Gene keeps saying, he says, I haven't done it for ages, stop it. It's like, doesn't matter. That's the rules of the playground.
Yeah, exactly. So what would you do at Red Bull? So everybody says that this was the worst thing that Ricciardo did. This was the biggest mistake Ricciardo did, was moving to Renault for 2019.
Yeah.
But at the tide of results that are coming against you, when the team is saying that Max is the next big thing, would you seriously want to stay and be a number 2 in that situation? As well, given Red Bull's history of number 2s to Australians?
Yeah, well, you have to look at the upgrades as well. So Mark Webber got his front wing taken off him because Vettel broke his, so they took Mark Webber's one. And at the time, you just go, "Oh, that's unfair. Why would you?" But no. Now we know they have this kind of policy of a number 1 driver, and we saw recently with Mekki saying, "Well, actually, we were holding spare parts for Verstappen in case he needed them. We might let Tsunoda use some of the spares now instead of just hoarding them for Max." And so you have to wonder, at this time, did he see any of those things? Like, did he see an upgrade go first to Verstappen? And that would be a very clear indication that you're not the number 1 driver. But the killer, which I'm sure you were going to come on to, the absolute killer is Baku 2018. That's the thing that shows you, no, you probably aren't the number 1 driver in this team.
Absolutely. So Baku 2018, we've all seen the incident where Max is heavily defending against Ricciardo coming down the first straight. So they're doing close to 230 miles an hour at this point.
Yeah, at the end of the Baku straight, yeah.
Yeah. And Ricciardo's got a great run on him, moves to the inside, and Max wiggles, shall we say, in the braking zone to be right in front of him.
Yep.
And Ricciardo's got nowhere to go. Locks up his brakes and submarines under the back of Verstappen. They both go off into the runoff. Game over for both of them. And you think, okay, fine. It's a racing incident. Max did a little bit of a naughty thing there, but the team aren't necessarily going to blame Max. But actually, they were almost the opposite in saying that Daniel was being too aggressive and that he shouldn't have been going for such a risky move. So, again, from Daniel's point of view, it's obvious to him that is not his fault. It's obvious to the rest of the world.
Okay, good. I wondered if you were going to say...
Oh, no. No, it's obvious to the rest of the world that Max moved under braking, there wasn't space on the inside for Ricciardo to dive out to if he wanted to.
No, so I'm going to have to go back and rewatch it now. From my memory, Ricciardo kind of sells a dummy on the outside. So Vettel's committed to the outside. Then they get into the braking zone. And then by that point, you've picked your braking zone, you know what mechanical grip you're going to have, what aero you're going to have, and Verstappen is moving in the braking zone. This is why you're not allowed to move in the braking zone. Goes in front of Ricciardo, and I guess that takes away some aero as well. So you can't brake where you wanted to anyway, and now there's a car in front of you, and then you go in. And to me, like, there's been rules written again. They called it the Verstappen rule, didn't they, about the moving under braking?
Yeah.
So that was very clearly Verstappen's fault, and for the team to come out and be annoyed that Ricciardo has, I guess, dared to overtake him, that's the writing on the wall. And then, was it mid-season? Was it after the end of the season that he announced that he was moving, that we got the news, or was it during the season?
It was during the season. The other thing is they'd already extended Max's contract.
Right.
And Red Bull were schmoozing Ricciardo in the media, saying this is the best driver pairing that you could ever wish for. We love Ricciardo. He's amazing. We love the amount of money he brings in with his smile on merch. And he was saying, but what they were saying in the media doesn't match what he's getting. You know, he's been a Red Bull junior since he was 18 years old. He just seems like he's been a bit gaslit into thinking that this is the place for him to be. Whereas he thought, as you said, he could do a Lewis and jump and then build up a team. Now, the difference, I guess, is that Lewis was already a champion by that point and was the team leader, moving to a works team that had a vision. He's sort of being beaten by a young upstart and wanting to, if we're not being very generous, run away from the challenge.
A lot of people say that, but I think if you could see that you're the number 2 driver, you should move. You know, people were really harsh about him running away from that title challenge, but you're not. If you're not getting the same upgrades, if you're not getting the same support as the other guy, you're settled into being a number 2. Now, if I was an F1 driver, and you know, I'm not that ambitious maybe, but if you said, "Oh, you can be at a top team," listen, you're going to be number 2. You know, what's that film, Talladega Nights? You know, I'll be the guy who slingshots the other guy, and I'll be along for the ride. And I do wonder, like, how many drivers are there out there who are just happy to be along for the ride? Be honest with me though. Tell me, like, hey, you're the number 2. Here's our very clear expectations of you. Also, you get to have like a ton of fun with the media and everything. We love your personality. Everyone's going to love you. No problem. Here's like a bunch of money. And, you know, when you go on a night out, you're a Formula One driver. I would take all of that. I think Hülkenberg would take that as well. I think there are some drivers who would take it, but not Ricciardo, and understandably so.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if he'd already had a championship under his belt, so if 2014 or 16 had gone his way, maybe he would have accepted that. But he had unfinished business. And one of the other daggers to the back for Red Bull was that he signed for Renault as well.
Yeah.
People that they were publicly falling out with. Their relationship has imploded. And I'm not saying I did research on Drive to Survive for this podcast, but just watching Cyril Abiteboul's face when he could rub it in with Christian Horner saying, oh, you haven't got an engine or a driver for next year. How's that feel?
I'm going to push back on you saying that, because you said Mercedes had a vision.
Yes.
But Renault under Abiteboul also very famously had the 5-year plan, didn't they? I don't know if this was part of the 5-year plan.
They did. So they had the 5-year plan that turned into a 10-year plan. Essentially, they wanted to win the championship on a budget, which I think most people from the outside could see is not going to work.
You're literally Renault. You're Renault. For God's sake, put some money in. I always felt like Renault, the F1 team, was having to fight to secure funding. And so when they said, no, we've got a vision, we've got a plan, just give us 5 years of money. Just give us 5 years of money. You know, this is like a perpetual motion machine. Yeah, we just need research money and grant money and we'll get you that perpetual motion machine. And they spent a lot of money on Ricciardo. So from my memory, it was a 40 million euro a year contract, wasn't it? Or 40 million total. I can't remember the...
Yeah, something massive like that.
That's
he was one of the best paid
huge.
Drivers in the world at that point.
Huge, and it's a huge coup. So at the moment, we're painting the picture that he was getting beaten by Verstappen, but he was still this great reputation. So they've nabbed Red Bull's star driver, a star driver from Red Bull, splashed the cash on him. They've got this new plan. They've got a new vision going forward. The shareholders are happy. It doesn't on paper. It wasn't the worst move in the world on paper.
Oh no, absolutely. They've got Ricciardo and Hülkenberg, two very highly regarded drivers. They've got a vision. They're going to go for it. And do you remember who... I gave it away there. Do you remember who was ousted by Ricciardo? It was Carlos Sainz. Poor little Carlos.
Carlos Sainz.
He seems to make a habit of being ousted by big signings coming in and vacating his seat. Poor little Carlos.
And this will be the second time this will be the first of 2 times that he takes a seat that Carlos Sainz has vacated as well. So look, I know we'll stay a little longer. Obviously, maybe we'll push up all the way hard up to the hour, 59 minutes and 59 seconds. But this is we can sum all of this up as the doom and gloom phase, because it just doesn't happen. So quite briefly, I know you've got like extensive notes on this, but we'll just go, why didn't it happen at Renault? Why didn't it happen at McLaren? Why didn't it happen at VCarb? So we start at Renault. His reputation was not trashed at Renault.
No, and actually, it went reasonably well at Renault once he'd got used to the car. And the reason for that comes back to what we were talking about earlier on. So the car was really similar to Red Bull, just not as good. So it had a really strong front end and a slightly weaker rear end. It didn't have that peak downforce,
Right.
so it was ultimately slower, but it suited that style that we talked about really well. So he was able to get the maximum from it. He put some really good performances in, and he trounced Nico Hülkenberg. And many people thought that was the end of Hülkenberg's career all the way back in 2019.
Yeah.
How wrong they were. But yeah, so he did some really good stuff over the 2 years he was there. He beat Hülkenberg. He then comprehensively beat Esteban Ocon, for example. Quali was 15-2, which I'm sure we can gloss over for the other pundits on our
we don't talk about that in
team.
certain company, but we can talk about it here.
Yeah, but as you say, what went badly at Renault was that the focus of the team, I think, just wasn't there. You were talking about the lack of budget, but also the Tracing Point saga. So where Racing Point, which is now Aston Martin, turned up with a pink Mercedes, essentially, for one of the seasons, and they were the spearhead in trying to legally challenge that.
Oh, that was so funny. That they even had the same flat nose. It's like, oh, you didn't even try a little bit to hide it. Why?
It was so bad. In the end, they had to try and get it made illegal on the brake calipers or something strange. But anyway.
I think it was the brake ducting was the only thing that they could comprehensively prove, or they thought they could prove was, and didn't they slightly get done for that in the end?
They got a fine and they got 7.5 points taken off of each driver or something, which didn't really suit the crime. But anyway, and this was, of course, during COVID and that sort of thing as well. So it was all a bit up in the air.
This is a dominant Mercedes now. So for the Ferrari challenge has waned because of the alleged whatevers with the brakes. And Mercedes are clear, aren't they? And Hamilton's clear of Bottas. So in a way, these are some of the least interesting seasons coming up here, 2019 and 2020 in F1.
True. Oh, absolutely. But also, so Ricciardo signed up to this really long-term project with Renault. But by the end of the first year, when it was actually going okay, he had already decided to jump ship to McLaren. So he'd said in the winter, when COVID was happening, he said, I'm going to go to McLaren at the end of next year.
Oh, don't do
so he
that.
had a whole season
horrible.
To play with Renault.
He Hamiltoned
which I'm
it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, he really did. And that was quite an interesting decision to make at that point. I mean, they were having lots of issues, of course, with the engine. He didn't find it was a supportive environment. Do you remember when Ricciardo reversed into Kvyat in Baku when they'd had a crash?
Reversed?
So Ricciardo dove down the inside of Kvyat, got it slightly wrong. They both went off into the runoff area, and then Kvyat reversed to try and get back on the circuit and didn't realise that Kvyat was just parked behind him.
Yes. I remember that now. Yeah. I want to look that up. I'll try and find that and do a link to it. But anyway, sorry, carry on.
No, I was going to say, the problem with that is a team at that point should go, you can't see anything when you're reversing. It was just a mistake. Big deal. We move on. But a Beatbull in particular would just say, oh, that's an embarrassment to Renault, all this sort of thing, very publicly berating him. And he was like, why are you doing this to me? What have I done? Yeah. And he just wasn't seeing that progress that he was looking for. So he moved to McLaren.
And this is the big one now, because now we know that project ultimately will yield 2 World Constructors Championships in 24 and 25 at least. And I will argue, people will argue against me, I think a different driver could have actually made the Norris car a proper Drivers' Championship contender.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
But he had to go in there and knock Norris, Norris was a relative rookie at that time, right? Not very many seasons in him. You got to go in there, stamp your authority, beat Norris, and then take that team for yourself and spearhead that development into the future.
Absolutely. That's what they were expecting to do. He was a big money signing, big expectations. There was huge hype around it, and it just tanked from the get-go. I say from the get-go. The first race was okay. He qualified reasonably well and ahead of Norris. But after that, it was absolutely atrocious. So it was 15-7 in favour of Norris in terms of qualifying.
Yeah.
And the whole season, in Imola, for example, Ricciardo was asked to move aside for Norris, who then went to finish on the podium for his first ever podium finish. And Ricciardo just dropped like a stone. It was just, he could not get on top of this car at all. And so gone.
No, sorry. It was a question for when you'd finished. Forgot the reason.
Cool. I was going to say the reason why he couldn't get on top of the McLaren compared to the Red Bull and to a lesser extent the Renault is because the McLaren has a much weaker front end at this point and a much more stable rear end. So it was like
a Vettel car.
Renault. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So if Ricciardo had gone a year earlier to Red Bull, he would have had a very different career trajectory because he would have got spanked by Vettel. Whereas in this era, he's only just finding that he has a weak front end. And the car demands in the McLaren that you put a lot of brake pressure on to dip the car forward to engage that front axle and turn.
So you need to V the corner.
You do, yeah, absolutely. And he didn't want to do that at all. And Norris doesn't really want to do it, but he was able to adapt himself. Whereas Ricciardo, who's 31 by this point, over the hill, you could say no, but he's just not able to adapt that driving style to fit the car. He very famously said that he was driving consciously. It wasn't a natural thing for him to be doing. He was always one step behind the car rather than anticipating where it was going.
I would say at that point, though, it was still a surprise to most people to see him doing that badly.
Massively. I'm a big Ricciardo fan, and I was massively disappointed. I was like, okay, a few races in, Surely he'll turn this around. He's a good enough driver. But he just couldn't adapt what he was doing. And in 2022, the final year of his McLaren contract, the qualifying record was 20-2.
Oh my God. 20-2.
That's like kind of Logan Sargent levels of badness.
Yeah, I mean, you could just say, well, Norris is really good at qualifying. I mean, you could do. I mean,
until you look at the points difference, which was 122-37.
Yeah. And also the win that came, the Ricciardo win that came, Norris was pretty much told to hold off. I still felt that Norris was the faster car in that race. I can't remember how Ricciardo ended up ahead.
Yeah, so Ricciardo he qualified ahead. He qualified behind by less than a tenth of a second, but was on the outside and made a fantastic start. This was where the sprint race decides the grid for the main race. Oh. So in the sprint race, he managed to overtake and be up to P3 by lap 1. And then in the end, he finishes P2 behind Verstappen. So in the main race, he jumps Verstappen into T1.
Okay.
And is the leader at that point. So he's genuinely got merit pace.
Yeah.
Yep. And Norris was in P3 and Hamilton was behind him in P4 battling. It was a great battle between those two. But this was another time, 2021, you might remember sorely.
I can't remember what happened. I can't remember anything of note happening to Hamilton or Verstappen.
This is, so Max decided to park his car unceremoniously on top of Lewis's head.
Yeah.
So at that point, then you've taken out their main competition. You got a McLaren 1-2. And Lando was pushing Ricciardo because behind him, I think it was Leclerc in the Ferrari, was trying to get onto terms with them after a safety car restart to try and see if he could win the race. But McLaren did then tell Lando to hold station behind Ricciardo because it was better for the team or whatever, because they didn't want to see them come together, essentially. And they wanted that 1-2.
It's a fair decision at that point, especially in a season where you're not winning, a bunch of races, and you suddenly get this opportunity. It's like, no, we could let them race fairly and just tell them to give each other room. No, let's just not do that. No.
It's not just a season. This was their first win since 2012.
Yeah, it's like the kids are like, Dad, we could get an ice cream in the car. We promise. We'll work really hard not to spill it. Yeah, or we could just not have ice cream in the car. Just not do that.
Yeah, exactly. So that was the one highlight of Ricciardo's McLaren career, but unfortunately the rest of it was fairly atrocious.
Yeah. And so, a big surprise. And this is how I'm feeling at the moment with Hamilton at Ferrari. And you're going, yeah, but he will get it, right? Because the brakes are completely different to what he's used to, and you go, yeah, but it's Lewis Hamilton, and then but with Ricciardo, it just never came. And I think even at the time, Monza felt like well done, but that's not enough to turn the tide of the way it was going. Is how it felt. But I can't remember. Was he let go? Did he decide to leave?
Yes, he was let go. So it was a 3-year contract he had. They dumped him at the end of 2 years. But they actually were really good about it, and they weren't blaming Ricciardo. They were actually saying he was very professional and very good about it all. But they just wanted to go in a different direction, so they moved him aside for another Australian.
Yeah, and that seems to be the way in F1. It's like the Sith.
There can only be one.
Yeah, there can only be one, a master and a student or whatever. That brings Piastri in, and that was. I'm trying to remember this, but Alpine had already said, but before Ricciardo's sacking, was it before Ricciardo's sacking? They said, Alpine said, he's driving for us.
Yes.
And then Piastri did the famous tweet of, they did this without my permission. I will not be driving for Alpine. But did we know about Ricciardo at the time? Do you remember?
No, we didn't. We didn't. So it was very short. It was like the same week.
Yeah, so it's like, why is he turning down the race seat? He's the reserve driver. Yeah. Why is he turning it down? This is so weird. And then we hear that he's been let go.
Absolutely.
So I wonder if Webber had some kind of influence in McLaren signing Piastri instead of retaining Ricciardo.
Ooh.
Did Webber go in there and go, oh, mate, look, it's not going well. Oh, I've got another Aussie for you. You barely noticed the difference.
Yeah, I mean, he is his manager. That's almost certainly what happened. And it seems a little bit like treason when you put it like that. But it was the right thing to do. And then Ricciardo, let's just finish off his career as it happened. So what you'd have thought at that point, he's gone, right? Nobody comes back from 2 years of being comprehensively trounced by your teammate. But Christian Horner, the romantic that he is, decided that he wanted to give Daniel one more chance, mainly because I think none of his other drivers were performing. Unfortunately, Perez wasn't performing.
It's okay. We can skip that.
For some reason, they didn't see Tsunoda as wanting to step up into.
Well,
at the
time, he wasn't firing. He wasn't looking good at the time.
It wasn't great, and obviously we had Nick De Vries at the time, who was terrible.
Yeah.
So he came in and replaced him. I think the reason why is because they took him under their wing as like a brand ambassador, going to do some donuts at various different city centres and smile for cameras. But they put him on the sim and actually found that his performance in the actual main Red Bull car was similar to Max's one-lap performance. And so you think, okay, this guy's still got it, right? If you give him a car that he likes, it can still work. So they put him back in the RB, and then he goes and throws it in a wall in Zandvoort and breaks his hand. Only 3 races into his comeback. His glorious comeback, and then he just breaks his hand and then misses, I think it was 5 races after that, and had surgery to fix his metacarpal in his hand.
I think it might have been 6 races, but yeah.
Yeah. So it was awful for him. It's just poor timing. But then when he did come back, he wasn't that impressive. There was one highlight in Mexico where he qualified 4th, and everybody goes, this is the Daniel we remember. But then that was pretty much the highlight. Tsunoda still managed to beat him in the time that they were together. It was 12 versus 9 in the races, 16 versus 9 in the qualifying, and he beat him in the points as well. So I guess you could summarize it and say that Ricciardo's highs were higher, but it wasn't frequent enough to earn his promotion back.
It was 5 races. Curse you and your research. And how did that win over just me guessing? Yeah, at the time though as well, Tsunoda's stock was not high. He could have just got unlucky that Tsunoda sort of gathered his form up together just at that time. And was driving a car that he'd been used to and in an atmosphere he'd been used to. But really, you think, yeah, okay, you didn't beat Norris. You got comprehensively thumped by Norris. But maybe Norris is the next, future superstar Ayrton Senna. There's that buzz around Lando Norris. But you had to go and beat Tsunoda at that time.
Oh, yeah. At that point, Tsunoda was definitely seen as average, and Red Bull were holding on to him because
of Honda.
They had no other option.
Because of Honda as well.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So the fact that he couldn't beat him, I think that was writing on the wall. And then you get to Singapore, what turns out to be his final competitive race, and he's all the way at the back. And Red Bull pit him and make him do a glory lap to take a point off of Lando for the fastest lap.
Yes.
And that's kind of like a little consolation prize. He gets a little trophy, and he's standing there at the end with his little rubber tire with the trophy written on it. But there's tears in his eyes, and you can see that he knows.
And they didn't let him say anything at the time.
No, it was so sad. And you could just tell that was it, done. And then I think the following week they announced that Lawson was going to replace him. But it wasn't the send-off that I think we've summarised here in the last metric hour that Ricciardo deserved. He was on his day, in his prime in 2014 to 16. You give him a car that's capable of winning that title. Basically, you put anything other than a Renault power unit in the back of it. And I think he demonstrated that he could have challenged for the title.
Firstly, ultimate insult for an Aussie, got replaced with a Kiwi.
Oh.
Yeah, that's rough. At least replace him with another Australian. Have you got no heart? What is going on? And secondly, look, he won races in seasons where he didn't have the best race car. So he never had a season where he had the top performing car. No,
correct.
No, he never did.
And he never won from pole either.
No.
He won races off grit and determination and overtaking.
How many race wins? How many race wins total?
8.
8, and how many podiums? Like a bunch of podiums, I assume, because we had to see that disgusting shoey.
Where was it? He had 8 wins, 3 poles, lots of podiums. I haven't got that information, and 17 fastest laps.
Well, there you go. I mean, 8 wins in never having had the fastest car on the grid is phenomenal. The whole podium thing with drinking out of your sweaty race shoe. Like, I don't care how fun or edgy. That is some you're a rugby guy, aren't you, Chris? So for you, that doesn't even touch the sides.
Oh, no, absolutely. That's fine.
If you don't know, rugby players and the way they socialise and what they do in a rugby club is disgusting. Like, they think it's all like lads. No, it is just gross. And the shoey is not as bad as all the rugby club stuff. But yeah, drinking out of your race shoe, no thank you. I don't want that. I don't need it, and I'm glad it's gone.
Oh, God, you just looking at the faces of the poor people he subjected to it, Martin Brundle and Lewis Hamilton.
No, Martin Brundle was desperate to be involved in that, but some people weren't.
He loved it. Yeah. But yeah, Stroll and Hamilton were just like, oh, do I really have to?
So I'm going to end this on a passionate thing from Craig that came in. He just came in as we were doing the show. So Craig in our Patreon Discord says, I'm not ashamed to say that Danny got me into F1. It was his big smile and laugh on Netflix that got us watching Drive to Survive, which made me realise that there was this whole sport that had all the stuff I love in it and that I was missing it. I also feel like he was on track at Red Bull, then got hit upside the career by the freight train of one of the greatest drivers that the sport had ever seen. Of course, we didn't know that at the time, that it was going to work out that way. And I think it killed him mentally. Just one bad career move after another in regards to his team selection. So thank you very much for that, Craig. I did ask for 5 words or less, but since that's come in.
To be fair, that just summarised the whole podcast that we just did very succintly, very nicely. When is he going to come and...
Yeah, he should just come and do that instead. But people have a lot of passion for Daniel Ricciardo. He can definitely say he was loved. But I think ultimately we have to include, his comments that he ended his career on. And, when he was saying about, he's not willing to put everything into every corner, because he didn't say it, but basically race cars are scary. And he was getting into his 30s and he had money, and go enjoy that. You definitely don't have to throw yourself at walls and corners and apexes into your 30s when you're already a very wealthy guy who can do anything he wants in the entire world. And on some level, I had respect for him acknowledging that and not just grinding, not Alonsoing out his career in the midfield.
Absolutely. And I think this won't be the last you see of him in the paddock, because he's now signed to be Ford Racing's ambassador, and obviously they're now the power unit supplier for Red Bull. So he's kind of rejoined the family again. So the Netflix love story will have a decent conclusion in the end. He's
retired from all forms of racing, and he came out and said that he's not going to do any racing at all.
Yes.
I knew that 3 weeks before he said it, because I just from a few degrees of separation, and I kept meaning, I want to do a clever tweet or say it on the show that I've had to make myself look like an insider, but I just never got round to saying it. And then he announced his full retirement from racing. But yeah, if you don't want to chuck yourself at corners in an F1 car, F1's relatively safe. You're not going to go and do Indy on an oval after F1, are you? If safety's a concern, you're not going to go and do rally.
No. Oh no,
which no one should do, and you're not going to get on a MotoGP bike or anything. So hardly a surprise there. But yeah, overall, yeah, there was. I think he actually did live to his potential. I think that's the maximum that was available in his career.
I think if his 2014 and 2016 cars had a Mercedes power unit in the back of the Red Bull, I think it'd been a very different story. But given the circumstances, he definitely maxed out what he could achieve. He did some phenomenal races. Whether he had that final percentage, maybe he did in those cars that suited him, but he couldn't adapt his racing quick enough, or at all, to be honest with you, to a different style of car. So I think he got flattered in the early part of his career and got shown up in the final part where he couldn't adapt, which is such a shame, because I think everybody by that point loved him so much that we were all willing for him to do so well. And it was difficult to watch, but we loved him all the same.
The most difficult thing for me to watch before he got confirmed for the VCarb seat was them watching what they had him doing on TikTok. And it was one where it was him sprinting in different types of footwear. So obviously trainers, bare feet, scuba diving, flippers, things like that. And I think maybe literally clown shoes, or I don't know if I've invented that in my head. And I was like, oh no, what's going on? But there was a sniff of a final push. Do you remember Horner did that? Oh, we tested him in Verstappen's car. He would have been on pole. He would have been on pole at Silverstone. So he's definitely, but it's not going well against Tsunoda. And not letting him say goodbye was a big miss. I think a huge miss for such a massive personality.
Yeah. What I would have liked to have seen was when they extended Perez's contract before they then tore it up at the end of the season. At that point, they knew they weren't going to keep Perez on. Why didn't they chuck Ricciardo in that car? Because I think that car suited Ricciardo's driving style. It's very front-endy. He might have done better with it compared to the rest. And I know, obviously we wanted to give Perez a chance. I think Perez is going to get his redemption arc at Cadillac which will be fantastic to see.
Yeah, I'm so torn. I really like Bottas, but I'm going to be cheering for his demise. I'm going to be cheering Perez on there. Chris, I could literally talk to you for hours about this. I love this, of going back and looking at careers. So we will definitely do it again. We'll try and do it every 6 weeks or so, I think, because, you've got a job and a life and you're a dad and you're busy. But who's next on our list? Or should we put it to listeners? Get in touch.
Absolutely. Send in who you'd like to see next. We've had thoughts of people like David Coulthard, for example.
Yeah.
Vettel. He's another one, although we've kind of covered him a little bit today. So maybe he's not quite as exciting, although we could cover his Ferrari downfall. It's a very similar story, to be honest with you.
Yep. We can even combine smaller stories as well. So email me, spanners@missedapex.net, subject line history, because I'll search for history in the search box, and tell us who you'd like to cover next. Go and follow Chris on Blue Sky at Catman F1, probably. But I'll put the link in the show notes below. I'll try and do some of those links to the YouTube things, to the incidents we've talked about, but no promises. And if you want to encourage us to do silly things like this and use up the full hour allotted to us, then support us at patreon.com/MissedApex. Until we see you next, work hard, be kind, and have fun. This was Missed Apex Podcast. I did the long intro today. Someone complained and said, stop doing the We Live F1. It's too long. I was like, whoa, pump the brakes, Gen Z, and literally just go, We Live F1. So tell me, should I keep the Live F1 or do it like I sometimes just go straight into it, like on the quali reviews? We do live F1 though, we're like nerds.